very welcome everybody to this workshop, How to Address the Sector Risk of Gender-Based Violence at Factory Level, Perspectives from Bangladesh. I'm very happy, those that joined already, that you managed to join us for this discussion today. Yeah, maybe while everybody is slowly trickling in, I start with some advertising. We have International Day Against Violence Against Women today. And on the occasion of this day, we launched an interview actually with Dr. Christina Stockfers from the German Trade Union Confederation. I don't know if I see her on our participant list, but yeah, we launched it on our website. If you're curious, please have a look. Many different of our members also launched campaigns. FEMNET, Sina, Marx, you will introduce your campaign later on yourself. But yeah, the DGB launched a campaign to ratify the Convention 190. Please check out their website or our social media posts if you want to support the campaign. Let me also start with some housekeeping rules. Sina, can you click to the next slide?
I'm trying to. There we go.
Anyways, I think most of you know those rules already. Everybody is muted, so we reduce background noise. But if you want to speak, please raise your hand and then we'll unmute you. Obviously, we would very much welcome to have a lively discussion, so please raise your hand and we will unmute you and you can speak up. If you don't feel comfortable, please yeah, just post your questions and comments in the chat. Obviously, yeah, Chatham House rules apply as usual, so everything that's said in this meeting will stay in this meeting. Actually, we said we want to record, but I didn't start this yet, I think. Oh, yes, it started. Great. So we will record the meeting, but we won't share it too widely, but with participants only. All right, next slide, please. Great. Okay, let me give you a quick overview of the agenda. Yeah, the objective of this workshop today is to present best practices on addressing the sector risk of gender-based violence and discrimination at factory level in Bangladesh, and to discuss with you how to get engaged in preventive and remedial activities on gender-based violence. I'll start with a very brief presentation of what we've done at the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles on Gender-Based Violence this year, but I'll be very brief. And then we will have two external inputs from Sina, Marx from FEMNET, who actually organized this workshop today, and from Kalpona, Akter from the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity. She will share insights and best practices from the work of the BCWS from Bangladesh, and I'm very happy she managed to join us for this discussion today, but I let Sina Marx introduce her later on in more detail. And then around 10-ish, I think we'll have time for Q&A, questions and answers and discussion. And yeah, we'll try to close the meeting, the workshop at 10:30. Yeah, so much on the agenda. Yeah, thank you. Just a quick overview of yeah, what we're actually doing and what we've done this year on gender-based violence at the partnership. As most of you know, gender-based violence is the annual priority topic of the partnership this year. We have a work plan and an expert group, so-called more working group on gender-based violence. And actually, the good news is the mandate and the project work plan of this group got prolonged yesterday by the steering committee. So we will continue working on the topic next year. the group together identified the following priority topics, and I'll just mention them quickly here in case there are some new people, new participants here that are interested in some of those topics. We worked on social audits and gender-based violence, but also on gender data, in particular the existing gender data gap. For example, we are currently finalizing a guidance document on social audits and gender-based violence. I hope it will be ready at the end of this year. Then, of course, another important topic is due diligence processes and risk assessments. It's one of the issues members are particularly interested in, of course, because of the upcoming review process. We talked a lot this year in several webinars on gender-sensitive grievance mechanism and workplace committees, and we'll also touch on that today. And then another topic, not everybody is interested, but quite many, is gender-sensitive COVID-19 response. We also worked on that and will continue next year. So if any of those topics we worked on and we will work on next year are of interest to you, please get in touch with us, and particularly with my colleague Anna Jischke that you can see on the screen. She will coordinate the working group next year. And also, if you want to have more detailed information on our work, there's a short report under the news about everything we've done, we've tried to do this year. That's also where you actually can find the interview with Christina Stockfish on the ILO convention. So much on what we've done. Why are we working, or why is this so important? Sina, can you show the next slide? Yeah, I think you all know this. Gender-based violence belongs to the sector risk of discrimination. So companies have to take it into account in their due diligence and risk assessment processes. The review process of the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles starts next year in April. Gender-based violence must be taken into account in the risk analysis. If found to be a risk, it must be addressed in or with at least one goal in companies' roadmaps. And if there are questions on this, the Partnership Secretariat developed support material, guidance documents in general on the review process, but also specifically with a focus on gender-based violence. For example, we developed fact sheets, country-specific fact sheets on gender-based violence on several countries. So again, if there are questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And so much on that was a really quick overview of what we've done. Before I hand over to Sina and our external inputs, we have prepared 2 questions. Can you show the next slide, Sina? All right, we'll have a quick survey, 2 questions to ask you to warm up a bit. I'll post the first one. Oops. I'm starting it. Why did you sign up for this webinar? We are curious to know. Can you all see the question, the survey? And can you click a response? Yeah, it looks like I can see some responses trickling in. I can see that the vast majority is using this as more as a training. All right. I can see almost everybody responded by now. All right, so I'll share it. Can you see the responses? All right, so I think the majority wants to learn more about best practices, which is great. Some are looking for new opportunities to promote gender equality, and just a few, I think some 12% are actually looking for more concrete ways to tackle gender-based violence, particularly in Bangladesh. That's great and good to know for us. I'll pose the next question. Obviously, we would be interested to know where you're standing in terms of your work on gender-based violence, and particularly also, our speakers are interested to know. Kalpona is interested to know with whom we are talking today. Yeah, please respond. You can actually click multiple responses. Yeah, please take your time. I'll leave it open for 2 more minutes. Are you already addressing gender-based violence risks in your supply chain, and how? Are you addressing it in your company policy, in your risk assessment, already further down the line? Great, I see some 40% responded already. I leave it open for a few more seconds. All right, please make your choice. All right, it's not changing anymore, so I'm closing the survey now and sharing the results. All right, the majority is already addressing gender-based violence issues in their company policies. This is great. A little less so in their risk assessments, but nevertheless in the company action plans. That's great as well. Some 47% already do awareness raising at factory level, which is great as well, and some 30% work on gender-sensitive grievance mechanisms. So I see we'll have a good discussion today about those interventions. Yeah, great. This is interesting and great to see. So all the different responses and so much is going on already in our member base. All right, back to the presentation, and Sina, back to you. I hand over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's always possible to use the chat as well, because, for example, for us, it would be really interesting to know who is doing gender-based violence awareness raising at factory level. So in case you're willing to share that, it would be great if you could share that in the chat. So are you seeing the presentation right now? Or do I need to share again? Okay, great. Let me go back. We had this check-in survey. So yeah, also welcome from my side. My name is Sina Marx. I'm a coordinator for international projects and campaigns at FEMNET. We are a civil society organization specifically focusing on women's rights in the garment sector. And I think many of you know our chairwoman, Gisela Burkhardt, who's also representing the civil society organizations within the steering committee of the Textile Partnership. My role within FEMNET is to mainly work together with partner organizations in the production countries, and jointly we're doing projects that are aiming at improving working conditions, especially for women workers. So what I'm going to talk about today is mainly a project that we implement together with the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity, so with Kalpona Akter, and also with SAFE, whom some of you might know, who are also involved in the partnership initiative on Tamil Nadu within the Textile Partnership. So in this project, back in 2017, we said we wanted to do something against gender-based violence, because from workers, we heard this to be one of the main problems that they are facing within the working environment. And we designed a project together that is funded by BMZ in order to combat and reduce gender-based violence in factories. So yeah, we wanted to share with you some of the experiences and best practices from that project. So one of the issues with gender-based violence is that we hear from workers a lot that this is a problem, but actually gender-based violence doesn't show up very often in factory audits. So one of the problems was to really establish solid data on what forms of gender-based violence come up and what prevalence there is for gender-based violence at factory level. So what we started with in 2018 was a comprehensive survey among workers in Bangladesh, looking at gender-based violence, how many of them experienced gender-based violence in which settings. And we published a study which is called Break the Silence, Stop the Violence, early this year, or actually on 8th of March, so Women's Day. So you're very, very welcome to have a look at that study. It's very detailed in terms of what forms of gender-based violence we find in Bangladeshi factories. I just want to share like very few details here. So basically, the main issue is that around 70% of workers experience gender-based violence inside garment factories. And a lot of these cases, or the vast majority of these cases, don't get reported, as you can see in the graph on the left side. So around 70% of the cases don't get reported at all. We also looked into, if cases get reported, whom they get reported to, which you can see in the graph on the right side. So the vast majority reports to trade unions. Of course, not all factories, or very little number of factories, do have trade unions present. So this is one of the main problems for workers who don't confide into supervisors or management to report on the issue of gender-based violence, on sexual harassment, and all of these cases. So one of the main purposes of our project was to actually establish structures within factories that would help workers report on cases, and that would also help to reduce gender-based violence at factory level. So Kalpona is going to talk about more on how that actually works. What I wanted to show you as well is a little bit of the context in which this whole topic of gender-based violence is set. Judith has already mentioned the ILO Convention 190. So that was a very great victory for women workers all around the globe, that in June last year, this ILO Convention on Violence and Harassment was passed. And this is actually a great instrument on international level that shows the necessity to do something against gender-based violence. It defines what is to be understood under gender-based violence at work. And it also is a very useful guidance for companies on how to tackle gender-based violence. So I can only encourage you to really look at the text. One of the issues that I would like to raise here, you can see there's a lot of campaigning work also from our side on the ratification of this ILO convention. You can see on the bottom right here one of the workers that BCWS is working with to promoting the ratification of the ILO convention, as well as in the middle you can see the women with the masks that say ratify ILO 190, who are workers that SAFE in India is working with. So the ratification of this convention is an issue that is really relevant for women all around the world. So I can only say that please join the campaigning all around the ratification process to make sure that this very useful guidance is actually also implemented in at country level. Another thing that I would like to point out here is a position paper that we just published together with the Clean Clothes campaign that explains a little bit why gender-based violence is so prevalent in garment factories specifically, or in the garment industry as a whole, and makes the link between also purchasing practices and gender-based violence, because the economic dependency of workers that is based on poverty wages actually fosters violence and harassment at factory level. So this paper builds on the ILO convention and also on the study results of the study we did together with BCWS, and contains many recommendations for companies on how to implement a gender-sensitive due diligence process. You can also download a German summary, which is part of the PST report for the General Assembly that was published today. So there's also a little article on that. But yeah, how to put all of these recommendations into practice at factory level, because of course you can do a lot at brand level in terms of due diligence, but yeah, it's also one of the most important challenges is how to tackle it at factory level, so it actually makes a difference for women workers on the ground. And obviously for this I would like to hand over to my colleague Kalpona Akter, who is the director of the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity, and who's a very well-known figure in the Bangladeshi labor activist scene, and she has been awarded many prizes for her tireless engagement for women workers. She has been a worker herself, a garment worker, starting at the age of 12 to work in garment factories. And yeah, she's also a representative of a trade union, so she can really provide the perspective of women workers on the ground and talk about how gender-based violence can be tackled there. Yeah, so I'd like to hand over to Kalpona.
We can't hear you, Kalpona. 1 second.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, thank you so much, Gina, and it is really a pleasure to be part of this discussion, especially on this day when we are celebrating Stop Violence and Harassment Against Women across the world. So could you just press the next slide? Yeah. So those you know Bangladesh, you know that Bangladesh is very famous for producing garments. We are the second exporters after China. We have over 4,000 factories across the country where 4 million workers are working, whom vast majority are women workers. And these are young women workers are working. It used to be over 80%, but now the number is declined. It is below 70%. And one of the reasons of this, reduction of these women's is gender-based violence. So it is that, one of the major problems. So our major export earning comes from garment. We can say that this industry is backbone of our economy as well. And it is so waste-dependent industry. So our 2/3 of export goes to European Union, and among European Union, I think 40% alone goes to Germany. So this relation really, really important for us with European Union as well as with Germany. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give a context of what's happening with women workers during this COVID. It is important to know, as you know, that people around the world has been affected by this, pandemic, and it is more practical for working class and more drier for the workers in production country. One of us, like our country is a production dense country. So far, last 6 or 7 months, we lost over 300,000 workers from the industry. They literally fired and sent their back home in an empty hand. In many cases, workers even not received their severances or wages. The pregnant women, it was like so shameful that pregnant women was handpicked and fired. We really made enough noise, and local media as well as international media whom we worked with. And after that, a little bit has been reduced to do that, but still not stopped. Our government, our government has announced like 1,000 million of stimulation package just to pay workers for this industry. But the workers, those are working in a second tier or a smaller factory, we can say subcontract factory, those workers did not receive any wages because of all the bar or benchmark they have to meet with the stimulation package conditions, so they didn't get that. One thing I really wanted to mention, soon this pandemic has started, we have seen that irresponsible behavior from the brands, retailers, as well as from the manufacturers. Our workers who made them profit for years, soon this pandemic started, all these groups just cleaned their hand and just showed that they don't have responsibility of these workers. They left them just to starving. So during this pandemic, the labor violation is very common. Workers these days, they have seen there is a tremendous violations are happening about their rights, union, and even leaves and everything, the wages as well. But they are feared to lodge complaints because if they do that, they will losing their jobs, and they cannot afford that. They're so feared to lose this job during this time. And as I said, gender-based violence has been enormously increased. In the first few months, it was in their house because they're more exposed to their partners. So it was like harassment and sexual harassment and domestic violence has been increased during that time. But when they come back to factory after 3 or 4 weeks, the violence has been increased in the factories before then COVID pandemic. Next slide, please. So our organization, it is a labor rights NGO. We are so connected with the grassroots workers here, our day-to-day work with workers, and we are closely working with all the national federation. And I'm also part of one of the national federation. Basically, I'm representing Bangladesh Garment and Industrial Workers Federation, which is one of the national center here. So under the BCWS umbrella, what do we do here? So first program that we call Know Your Rights. Under this program, we run many, but one of them is educating workers about their law and rights and job and responsibilities. Because we believe, and I believe, without knowing the law and rights, workers won't able to ask. So, and after that, we shift these workers to many kind of training, which we call Amplify Your Voice, the workers' voice program. So there are many kinds of training program that we run for workers so they can skills themselves to negotiate with the respective factory management. We run program that we call Hard Rights Program. So again, one title of this program is just not one activity. There are many activity under that. So Hard Rights Program is our main focus to bring women workers in the front line So we have many kinds of training programs for them, so that can strengthen these women and bring a belief within them that they can be in the front line, they can hold the leadership and be a make changer. So that is the program. And after that, we have legal aid programs. So the legal aid for labor and criminal justice as well. It is become very common when workers try to raise their voice, they just lose their job, or many other way that the job security is that ill in here, workers can be fired anytime. So somebody need to have their back. So our legal program are having their back and helping them. And other way that workers when raise their voice to increase the minimum wage, at least four different year we have seen their voice has been criminalized. So we also help our worker to get bail from the criminal court when they have been falsely charged. And under the advocacy and campaign programs, we do enormous. And we just wanted to mention one of them, two of them, of course. One is a safe workplace for our workers. Many of you know Rana Plaza. So our campaign, which we have been, started like 15 years ago, but when 7 years ago Rana Plaza collapsed, that has given a huge pressure to the branded retailers to sign on the agreement which we call a code on Bangladesh fire and building safety. So this is one of the bigger campaign we run, and now we are putting all our effort to run, campaign on Ratify C-190 by our government, and also to act, to see the act by the brand and retailers. Next slide, please. So, when we talk about the good practice, we really need to mention what we have in here. So our, one of the bigger lawyers group NGO, in back 2009, they have been submitted an application in front of High Court, Honorable High Court in here, and High Court has given a directive on it that the violence it is driven to a prevention of GBV and stop harassment at workplaces, educational institute and public places and transport. So it's a huge, for us, because we have been talking about gender-based violence for many years, but it's not been recognized by our legislator prior to this. So our, the High Court really given a huge light on that, and it is too important for us because it is include all the places where women's faces, mostly like women, are facing all these harassments, and it has two amazing objectives. One is that the create awareness about sexual harassment, of course, definition and forms, and second was the create awareness that sexual harassment is a punishable offense. Always we talk about that, yeah, these are violence, etc., but people never understand that it is a punishable, offense that they do. So this is one of the, important objectives that we have, important two objectives we have under the High Court directive. So the content it has been very clearly said that the employers and authorities have a duty. They should adopt the preventing steps. Disciplinary action, they should take the disciplinary actions, and complaint mechanism need to be there, and it should be punishable. There should be a punishment. If you don't, if you just take a complaint and don't do the punishment, then there will be no mean of this directive. There is no mean will be having a committee or a prevention step. So it has, this directive has all these content, which we would say that it is a very good practice if authorities would be adopting that in their workplaces. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, the directive has given in back 2009, and now we are in 2020. So we definitely discuss that how many of the institutions in education or bank or workplaces or in factories, how many of them has been adopted as or practicing that in their factories? It is few, very few. And even if some of them, they say they do have that, many cases we found it is in a document, not in a practice. So, what exactly can happen that if we have anti-harassment committees in the factories? So anti-harassment committees can make a huge change in the factories. Now these days, the factories can talk about, yeah, we have unions, so there is a union committee. We have a safety committee. We have workers participatory committee. But none of this committee are really, looking into all the harassment that workers are being facing in these factories. So having a AAC, anti-harassment committee, is really making a difference because it will tell workers that why this committee is. It has to be women-headed, in a possible places, and the places we have been talking about, it is for Bangladesh. Every places there is a woman, so it can be women-headed. One more important, it is this committee has to have 2 persons from who are outsider and they're expert on gender or working on gender or sexual abuses. So that there is a scope of union or NGOs. Those are working on worker rights and they know about gender and all these sexual abuses, how to deal with this. So they can be totally in this committee. And it has like more important element that this has to be show a annual report that how many cases has been found, and that has to be submitted to the government. And it has one other amazing things that is offsite monitoring, which is not very common in every cases in here that you have offsite monitoring system. Next slide, please. So, considering all these, that what BCWS is exactly doing to preventing the gender-based violence in these workplaces. So it is nothing new for BCWS. I am the director of BCWS, but at the same time, I'm a co-founder of this organization. So it has been 20 years. So since 20 years, we know this exists. And I should say that I should, go even back, that I started knowing these gender-based violence and sexual harassments exist in the factories since I started working in age of 12. It is not in the factory, also in commute and community, and I have been faced that as well. So since then, we have been always talking about it, but never was, in a situation to run a comprehensive package of activities to prevent it. So, with FEMNET, 2 years ago, we started this, I think, year and a half or 2 years almost. We have been drafting this project proposal and we have been working together. And now we are, since 1 year or so, we are implementing. And the work we do, we have done a baseline survey. Some of the information Sina already has shared, that what was the findings of the baseline survey. We are doing a activity called Breaking the Taboo Session. It is so important because our women, they know they are being facing all these gender-based violence in their factories, but some cases they don't want it to, they don't know the forms, and also they just don't want to talk about it because culturally we have been taught not to talk about it. If you do, then women, it is your fault. You have done something, that is why you are facing these violences. That is why, we never been spoke out on this. I mean, when we say we, definitely are women workers. So for us, breaking that taboo is really important. My experience was like very beginning when we started breaking this taboo, we brought frontline factory level leaders who are very outspoken, who are negotiating with their respective factory management in their factories those women did not talk about, didn't say any single word in first 2 sessions. In third session, they started saying, third session in third week, and started saying, yeah, I have seen, but it never happened with me. Fourth, fifth week, they said, yes, I have been seeing that my coworker have been, constantly raped by the supervisor in the factory. So it took 5 weeks for women who, for years, she has been fighting for her and her co-worker rights in the factory, like ways to leave, all these issues. But she don't wanted to talk about this, the violences. So that is why the taboo session is important. And then sensitization workshop, it is like more men and women, like for many workers, we are bringing them that this is what happened. This is, you need to know and you need to prevent it and you need to speak out in your factory. Then we have advanced level of GBV training to form anti-harassment committees in the factory. These folks will be the champion to prevent and fight in the factory to prevent the gender-based violence in their factory, having complaints and resolving those. We have training for management and workers to, how to establish and run the anti-harassment committee in the factories. We have meetings with the key stakeholders because, now these days, any work you cannot do alone. You need all the stakeholders on the board. Like this violence would be not preventable if management or factory management do not come on the board, if we do not have the community and community leaders with us. So the stakeholders really, really important. We have advisory committees who is advising us, what to do and what not to do, and how giving us directive in many cases. And those, contain with workers, union leaders, NGO leaders, factory management, as well as community and community leaders. And we have done, the campaign materials, the posters, the leaflets, as well as now these days we are being, producing masks for workers and with a statement to have, ratify ILO convention, also to stop violence and harassment in the factories. So these are we are being, doing to prevent it. And it's a long-term process, and we will keep working on it as we have been started on that. Next slide, please. So, to prevention these violence, what we need to keep working, as I said, and two very effective campaign we're going to do. We are already one. We are both we are doing together. But it is great that, we already have ILO Convention C-190. So we are doing advocacy campaign in here and lobbying with the government to ratify ILO Convention C-190 by our government, so we can get a, effective legislation to prevent GBV in all these areas that we are talking about, especially workplace, transport, public place, and communities. And without bringing women voice in the front line, it would be not possible to prevent this, because women have to recognize this is a violence. They need to bring their voice in the front line to prevent it and say stop violence. So we are working on it, and keep breaking the taboo will be our constant program. And the taboo is not only with the workers, it is with management as well, because management, there is a there is a violence, but they don't want it to talk about it, or they don't want it to accept it. So this is one kind of taboo, I would say. So we will be breaking these taboos. We'll keep doing that.
Maybe Kalpona, just one thing, because a question came in, a written question regarding the High Court directive. And when the question was when it is expected that the directive would be put into actual legislation. And you mentioned it here that you're campaigning towards an effective legislation for the prevention and handling of gender-based violence, which was also one of the topics of our joint project. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what the status is and what maybe challenges are as well.
Yeah, so in terms of the legislation, there is a 5 draft law already been submitted to the government. That is before even ILO convention. So that already has been given to the government, and government working on it. Due to COVID, it is a little slowdown, but we hope that together we'll give a push and to go there. We really don't know that how long it would take, but it should take very minimum time, because we have a women prime minister, women speaker in the parliament. We have a handful number of women parliamentarian. We have opposition leader that is women. So all the women, all those are fighting to have this law, those are women too. It shouldn't have take time. And we have one more advantage, like the manufacturers association head is women now. Hopefully, from the brand side, from workers, if we all try together, we really can have a full legislation. But we need to fight. I mean, we need to try. Otherwise, it won't be possible.
Maybe as a recommendation to the person who posed this question, in the panel discussion, the head of BGMEA, Rubana Hook, is going to be present. So maybe you can ask your question in terms of what BGMEA is doing towards pushing this legislation in the panel discussion.
Thank you, Sina. Yeah, adding that. Yeah. Next slide, please. So now the question is, I'm just very end of my slides, and I will be not speaking much. Okay. So it is like what you can do supporting, in support and prevention of the gender-based violence. So first, of course, adopt a workplace policy on GBV. This is important, and implement it. Just adopting would be not helping if you don't implement it. So please adopt and implement. The second is proactively make GBV a preference in your, HRDD. Again, just preference would be fine, but if you don't put that in very strongly in your auditing clause, then it will be not helping. So during the audit, workers need to be asked this question, not in a direct way, maybe very indirect way, in a soft way. Ask the question in outside of the factory premises. Then the answer will be reflect in the audit. Take action to reduce gender-based violence. Take appropriate actions, I would say. Have a anti-harassment committee. Have a strong monitor, a strong complaints mechanism. Have outsider in the committee. I mean, make sure that have a outsider expert on this, and that all these complaints really get a resolution. And resolution needs to be fair and transparent. And it should be, if it is punishable, it should get punishment. And then monitor, especially like gender sensitive social audits. So, what I was saying, like, previous, that women, speak to these women sensitively, handle with them care. And when you talk to them, take a, I think it should be better to speak to them outside of the factory premises, because they would be not, comfortable to talk about this in their factory, even if they, if there is a violence even they see or they're being facing, they will be not taught, because there might be consequences of their job on their job, so they will be not taking that risk. Then provide information and training to workers and management. This is really important. Sensitize them. Many cases I say that many firms, workers or management even don't want to recognize these are the gender-based violence. So they need to know the forms of the violences, and then during the training they can educate themselves, and that can give one step forward to prevent it. Support the victims of gender-based violence. This is so important. I was reading that one of the articles yesterday, that we all have a problem. We can criticize, but we never wanted to support the victim. We wanted to see the victim in a very, put her or him in under the microscope and try to find what problem she had, rather giving her a space that, yeah, you have faced this and you need a safe space. She need a safe people where she really can say, or he really can say, what kinds of violence she has been faced. And during the, she, as I said, that she don't want to raise her voice because she don't want to lose the job, and also facing harassment and retaliation. Due to fear of that, she don't even want to lodge the complaint. So creating a space for victim is really, really important. And last but not, last not the least, that it is, what I say, that union is on the way out for workers. So create a space for workers to, organize freely and bargain freely in your supplier factories. And if there is a manufacturer, so please create a space for workers so they're free to organize, and make sure that the women get a really, space to be in the front line. We are working, but if a manufacturer or if a brand and retailers create that space for our workers, that will help more. In our law, we do have right to organize and right to bargain, but we are not free to do that. So a space needs to be created for us. I wanted to stop here, so I'll be happy to answer if you have any question or need any clarification. Thank you.
Sina, I see a question that was posted. Can I read it out?
Sure, yeah.
Kalpona, so one person posted that most of the auditors are men, and she's reckoning that this is a problem, and it's a problem difficult to solve when it comes to reporting gender-based violence. So what's your take on that, and what would be your recommendation? Is there a solution to that? Yeah, what's your step?
Yeah, I mean, really important question. Thank you who did that. Okay. So yes, it is true that there is a men's auditor mostly, but there is a women's as well that I have experience to see. That is why we say that there should be women sensitive, auditing. So bring more women in the auditing system, and also the auditing company can add the labor rights group, the NGOs and unions with their auditing system. The workers will be more comfortable to talk to a worker rights, in front of worker rights activists or union leader about the violence or harassment they have been facing in their factories. I mean, they will be easily talk about gender-based violence rather, a man auditor than in compared to a union leader or labor rights group. So I'll be suggesting that as well.
Right, and I actually see somebody raising her hand. Yvonne, I'm unmuting you. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you a lot, Kalpona, for this very, very interesting information. You also mentioned the accord and the importance of gender-based grievance mechanisms. So I was wondering if this is now not a great opportunity to include this in the RSC, which is following the accord, because as far as I know, they will hopefully continue with the grievance mechanism from the accord. And if that one would then, of course, be gender-based, or considering gender-based topics, would be fantastic. I'm not sure, are you in contact with the RSC and discussing that topic also? Is this something you're advocating for? How do you see that?
Okay, respond to that directly. If a court complaint mechanism adopted by RSC and extend that to gender-based, will be not having any problem. But the question is that whether, as a court successor, RSC can keep maintaining that what a court has been done. The first of all, RSC is not power balanced. There is, there is a 18 seats, only 6 of them for union. And what I heard from our union folks who sit in the board, that the manufacturers already trying to change the accord complaint mechanism system. So already, you know, we already see the problem. So I would be not suggesting that we should bring these to RSC at this moment until RSC prove us that they are continuing as, you know, continuing their complaint mechanism as transparent, as, you know, workers friendly that accord has been done.
Thank you very much.
Right, Kalpona, there is another question. Actually, thank you for the fascinating presentation. The person saying, can you tell us a little more about anti-harassment committees that are operating in factories? How many have been set up, and is there a monitoring process in place already? Is it recorded how many complaints they've dealt with? Is there any learning about how to make them more sustainable and effective? Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it is like more question to a, you know, for a Rubana Hub or for government rather than me, because there is no public data on that, how many committees are really exist. And there is no public data that we can get that how many complaints has been lodged out of those, you know, in those anti-harassment committee. I know Fairware Foundation is running some kind of program, and no idea that how many committees are there, and their information is not public as well, that we can see that how many complaints has been lost. So, you know, out of 4,000 factories, I would say I don't see that 2% factory even has an anti-harassment committee. If they even have, those are mostly in documented, not in practice. So few of them are maybe working, but we don't have data on that. And from our program that we are running, we are about to set up the you know, anti-harassment committee, but by then the pandemic started, so we are going slow. But when we'll be having the anti-harassment committee, the factories we are working with, we'll have our you know, our representative on it, and we'll be definitely share the all, you know, share the information transparently that how many cases we have been found, how many complaints those committee has been found, and how many resolved, and how what kind of punishment has been given.
Maybe just a quick side note, because the other partner within that project that we do on anti-harassment committees is SAFE, who is an Indian partner. And India, in contrast to Bangladesh, already has a law on anti-harassment committees, or in India it's called internal complaints committees, ICCs. So obviously, if you have legislation, that helps a lot, both in terms of getting these committees working and in terms of reporting transparently about it. So if you're interested to learn a little bit about the best practices from India, where there is a better established data base, then you're welcome to be in touch.
And maybe, Kalpona, you can add a little bit on what do you think is are necessary preconditions from the work that you started, and what brands could do as well, maybe to support those processes, if there is experience in that already.
Mm-hmm. So the brand, you know, the very first thing they can do, that asking their suppliers to follow the High Court directive at this moment. You know, directive already given a clear, you know, perspectives what the factory authorities should do. So this is the first thing that suppliers, the brand and retailers can tell their suppliers. Second, you know, they are one of the stakeholders in the supply chain. So we have been talking about having or ratifying the ILO Convention C190. So they can give their voice, and the countries where they're sourcing from, they can, through their manufacturers, they can reach out to the government of those countries and ask to ratify the ILO Convention C190. It would be like a extraordinary work if they can do that. This is really important. I mean, they are part of the supply chain, so they are one of the important stakeholders, so they definitely can do it. And every country and manufacturers, they listen to their brands. They really do. So your voice will be really helpful if they really ask those government, like our government or our manufacturers, to act on it. And when we have this convention ratified, of course, as a stakeholder, they can push for a legislation along with us, and then make sure that get enforced in their factories. So this is whole thing they can do. It's a package.
Judith, I think there's another hand raised. I think it's Michael Reidig.
All right, I'm trying to unmute him if I find him on the participant list. Sorry. Yes.
Good morning, and first of all, my compliments for this great overview, Kalpona and Sina. And I think Kalpona has answered already a lot of questions, so I have two questions to Sina in the end. When you look at the whole topic of women issues in the supply chain, not only in Bangladesh, but in many Asian countries, brands might struggle, that there are a lot of good initiatives, and I think an initiative on the worst form of which is violence against women is of course a very, very, very important one. But as brands, you can be sometimes lost in many initiatives. We did recently a short inventory where we listed 5, 6, 7 different organizations tackling women equally, let's say women empowerment as a headline in the supply chain. What is, from your point of view, Sina, the key reason that we have so many scattered initiatives rather than that the big organizations of, let's say, this globe, like the ILO or whoever it is, are really fostering one big program, which is an easy as well to follow to brands, instead of, let's say, joining here a little bit the initiative you just proposed, then the SAFE project, then there's PACE from the GAP, there's a lot of other things, which makes it also, let's say, which has unfortunately then as well the problem of scale sometimes. That's question number one. And question number two is, because you mentioned in your intro as well, grievance mechanism. Is there any to be shared flow from your perspective, how a proper grievance mechanism should look like, which you can share?
Yeah, maybe for the first question, I mean, I would say that the taboo is one of the main reasons why this topic has been handled mainly by those organizations who are in direct contact with workers and who actually get to know about the problems, while a systematic approach has been difficult for a long time, although the issue was known to those who do grassroots work. I think with the ILO convention, this is likely to change. I mean, the ratification process is very slow, as Judith posted into the question panel regarding the ratification within European countries. Right now, the decision is with the EU Council, but we hope that this is going to be a rather fast process now, so that ratification within the EU, but also within other production countries can go ahead. I mean, in countries where there is legislation on gender-based violence and harassment at country level, there is also larger programs, or at least programs that can link to legislation and to government programs that are set out for this topic. So I hope that with the ratification of the ILO convention, this is going to be rolled out at national level as well. On the other hand, I think that it's also an individual responsibility for each and every brand to look at their supply chain and to look at this risk of gender discrimination and violence and harassment, and to see how you can work together with your suppliers to work towards improvements here, even though there might not be large-scale programs implemented by the ILO, for example. Regarding the complaints mechanism, I would say that if you're more interested in that, it would be very useful to also link to the complaints mechanism expert group, because the partnership is currently collaborating with Fair Wear Foundation on a complaint mechanism, which is actually also from our perspective a good one, in terms of providing workers with a possibility to easily access this complaint mechanism, access it in their local language, because many of the larger initiatives, such as, I don't know, BCI Amfori, for example, do not provide these low-level access to complaint mechanisms. And what is obviously very important is to follow up on complaints, especially when looking at gender-based violence. Like when a worker dares to speak up on such an issue and then sees nothing happening as a follow-up, then obviously this is not a good complaints mechanism, and the Fair Wear mechanism does follow up on cases together with brands. So this is something that we think is useful. So for the PST, the question is rather on how to upscale that. At least this is what I think. I don't know, Kalpona, if you want to add what a complaint mechanism should look like specifically when looking at violence and harassment.
For this moment, I would say, until we have a full law, for this moment, the High Court directive, as it says, the complaint mechanism should be like that. When we have full law, based on ILO convention, it can be changed. But, having women-headed, or mostly women in the community, and having two experts from outside, I think this is amazing. And yeah, and soon as the report goes, report need to be submitted, I think there will be transparency as well. So for this moment, I think we can start with this, and it's, it can be made better when we have full legislation.
Yeah, maybe just to get the definition of a complaint mechanism clear. What Kalpona was talking about is the complaint mechanism within the factory. So that would be an anti-harassment committee, for example, handling complaints at factory level. What I was talking about is more of the backup mechanism that workers could approach if there is no anti-harassment committee, or the committee can't handle the complaints, which is, for example, a hotline or something like that.
I see that we have one more question, but before that, I also wanted to add on the aspect of working together, creating synergies with other initiatives and not doubling efforts, because I think that's what we are very much trying to do at the partnership. I mean, Sina mentioned that regarding grievance mechanisms, we are working together with Fair Wear. But the same on other topics, whether it's social audits or whether it's social audits and gender-based violence, where we work together with GOTS and the EVN, or actually on gender data. We are working very closely with BSR, with Fair Wear, with ETI. They are actually in the process of launching a project in January to collect gender-sensitive data. They already have companies interested in joining them, and if anybody is here who's interested in joining as well, you are very welcome to reach out to us. We will publish more information on that at the beginning of next year, but yeah, we had a webinar already on that, on social audits, on gender data. If there's interest in joining those initiatives and actually collaborating and working together with other initiatives, please reach out. And then we have a question from Sebastian I want to read out. Thanks very much for the presentation. One of the actions you mentioned, Kalpona, is that companies should take is to monitor and collect gender-specific data. Could you provide us with more details on which gender-specific data you think is of special relevance to be collected?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure any of your auditing system, is there any question that whether these women have been faced any violence in the factory? The forms of violence can be many, like whether they have been touched inappropriately by their management, whether there was a discrimination on the promotion. So there may be many kinds of, gender-based violence that we can talk about. Whether any question about that, are you getting less of wages than your co-worker who is male doing same work? So that is like a gender form of violence as well, like gender form economic violence that worker been facing. So in order to sexual harassment, sexual harassment, is there any question in your auditing form that whether those women has been sexually bullied in the factory by their co-worker or by middle managers? So if those question is not in your auditing form, then you don't have a gender sensitive questions, or you are not doing a gender sensitive auditing. These are like a few example, I would say. So if you don't have that, you need to work on this question. And I would say that before rephrasing your questionnaire, first you need to talk to these women what kinds of harassment, the violence and harassment they've been facing at the workplace, and then rephrase your questionnaire and make it gender sensitive.
Maybe to make it easier for you, if you don't want to start with the social audits, because this might be a little bit more difficult, is to start with the data you get from your suppliers. Easily gathered data like how many women and men are working in the factories, what is the wage gap. This is something that should be easily collectible through management, and also the distribution of women and men regarding position. For example, percentage of women in supervisory positions, this kind of thing will give you at least an insight into power relations within factories.
Mm-hmm.
Sina, I think we need to close slowly. Yeah, we're reaching the end of our webinar, but I also don't see any more questions. We've prepared 2 last survey questions for everybody. Shall we post them? Yeah. All right. Just 2 last questions before we are closing webinar. We want to know from you whether we should deepen this discussion on best practices. Is this helpful? Do you want to learn more about best practices on gender-based violence? Do you actually want to get active, learn more and discuss what we could do collectively? Or is it actually that you're already quite engaged in, as you mentioned as well, in multiple activities? There's an overlap maybe you have different priorities at the moment. Let us know, so we know how to design our the next sessions.
And maybe for those who answer with yes, since it's an anonymous survey, you're very welcome to put your names and or company names into the chat so that we can contact you for further information or further events that we're planning.
Also, please feel free to reach out to us, to Anna, to Sina afterwards, if you want to get engaged in any of those initiatives we mentioned. All right, I think most people made their choice, so I'm closing it now. Yeah, all right, great. That looks really interesting. So there's a need and desire, interest in learning more. but as well to start discussions on what we could do. Around 30%. So yeah, that's interesting. Please, as we said, reach out to us. All right, final question. So particularly for those that are interested in engaging in activities, what is it what you would like to do? You can respond to multiple, you can tick multiple responses. Please let us know. In case you are interested in joining activities, joining hands, as you said, sometimes there is an overlap. Multiple initiatives are intervening, so maybe you are interested in joining hands. Let us know. All right, I see responses trickling in. Half of everybody, half the people responded. Please, I give it one more second. All right, I'm closing it. Can everybody see the responses? All right, I see. That is very interesting. So there's a great interest in training and awareness raising at factory level. There's a large interest in collecting gender data. As I said, we are collaborating with Fairware, with VSR, with ETI. They will be launching a project, and we are free to join. So please be in touch. Mainstream gender sensitive approaches in already existing PST activities. Of course, that's important. As Sina mentioned, the grievance mechanisms, for example, it's something we could think of and work on. So yeah, thank you very much for that input. We will take this up. All right, and I think we ran over time already by 4 minutes, and we need to close so everybody can get into the next webinar or join the marketplace. I think, yes, this was a great discussion. I see there's a lot of interest to learn more and to engage in further discussion, also from all these questions that came in. Thank you so much for participating, and yeah, thanks particularly to Kalpona for her time and for those really valuable insights and yeah, experiences, and to Sina for yeah, organizing this great webinar.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yeah, I really hope that those who clicked on being interested in taking this discussion further will get in contact. I think the annual topic 2020 turned out to be a little bit annual topic COVID-19. So I hope that 2021 will give the stage to gender discrimination and its reduction a bit more than yeah, it was possible this year. So thanks a lot, Kalpona, for your input.
Sure, happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Bye.